My name's Katie, and this channel is Homo Librariensis. Thank you for visiting me here. Um, Today I just wanted to talk to you about what I've been reading. So I guess this is kind of a May wrap-up. I'm not entirely sure if this is everything that I've read in May. I didn't go back and look, but these are the books I haven't wrapped up yet, and it just happens to be the 1st of June, end of May. Yeah, let's dive right in and see. I finished 3 books in the last little while. I'll be looking down maybe at my phone for some of my notes. So I don't know what order to put them in. Probably the order that they're sitting here. The first book that I'll talk to you about is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I have so many, I don't even know what to say about this book. So I rated it on Goodreads. I actually only rated it 3 stars, and it's definitely more than 3 stars. I just couldn't bring myself to give it 4, so I feel like it's 3.5. I understand completely why this is a classic. It is absolutely one of the most beautifully written books I've ever read. My initial worry getting into the book was that it would be dry or nothing would happen. I'm a little bit intimidated by classics, or maybe even intimidated isn't the word. I just haven't had great experiences with them. So I was a little bit wary of it, and I ended up being very pleasantly surprised in that lots happened. I just lost steam halfway through. So it was originally published in 1967. The novel itself follows a family called the Buendia family, and it follows them through 7 generations of their family in this sort of isolated town that they were part of founding. And I mean, so much happens, yet I lost the point. I lost why everything was happening, why we were learning these things. And it is a little bit difficult to keep the characters all straight. They're just all named the same thing, slight variations of the same name. So something else I should mention is, while it follows this fictional family, it is magical realism. One of the interviews with Gabriel Garcia Marquez said that he did this because he learned it from his grandmother and how she would tell stories, and it didn't matter how truthful these stories were. She could be telling 100% truth, or she could be putting in ghosts and spells and just magical realism in the way that she would tell these stories, but she would tell them all as if they were true. And so he had a hard time telling the difference between true and untrue, or sort of magical, because she would do everything with sort of this deadpan, the same expression for everything. And so the book very much has that feeling that there's nothing strange really or wonderful about the magical realism. It's just sort of told like anything else in that story. This was my first Marquez, and I'd really like to read more, and I'd really like to read this again, actually, because I did really enjoy the writing, and I liked the characters. I liked some of the characters. Because the book is so expansive, 7 different generations, multiple people in each generation, it was hard to really care about any one individual character, or to really feel attached to them, because they came and went throughout the story so much, except for the matriarch, Ursula, who kind of she gets a little bit pushed aside, but she's actually definitely the backbone of the whole family. So I wish I could read in the original Spanish, but my Spanish is not that good. Another book that I read in May is The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule. I got this out of the library. Ted Bundy, The Classic Case of Serial Murder. I can't remember if I rated it 3 or 4 stars. I mean, I definitely enjoyed it enough to continue reading, and it is absolutely fascinating. I mean, the man was a horrific monster who murdered women in multiple states, and they really still have no idea how many women he murdered. And so it's written by Anne Rule. She's now known to be a prolific crime writer. At the time, she was just writing for smaller publications, and she had a deal to write a book about whoever was murdering young women in the Pacific Northwest. She meets Ted Bundy earlier in her life as volunteers at a crisis line, and they become really good friends. She thinks he's a lot younger than her. he seems charming and caring and well put together, and so they become close friends. And it actually, even though everything kind of leads or points to him being this person, they get all these clues about who they're looking for, and they directly point to this person. Even at that point, while she did report him to the police, she kind of did so nonchalantly and with really not believing that it could actually be him. And so she tells the story of his life, his crimes, their interactions, the process of capturing him. What I struggled with this book is, one, that I was choosing to read it, so I don't know why we have this fascination, but we do. My favorite podcast is My Favorite Murder. So I've definitely talked about Ted Bundy on there. But I do struggle with the fact that, like, she really humanizes this. This is written in 1980, I believe. And then I have the 20-year anniversary edition where she's added more details or essays afterward. And the actual book is just, it's so... You can just tell she still very much believes in or cares for Ted Bundy. She does, by the end, acknowledge that she believes he is the one. It's pretty hard to deny, but the book is so humanizing of him. I just don't see the point. I don't know that we need to have a lot of sympathy for him. And she does address that a bit in the further essay. So there's an afterword and then a further essay, one written 10 years later and one written 20 years later. And as the distance between the time of the crimes and all this happening gets larger, she does seem to take a less sort of personal or biased approach and kind of admits that, not directly, but she doesn't seem to humanize him as much. It's just a very strange dynamic, and I think that was the most unsettling thing about the book, is that she does try to humanize him so much, and I don't know, I struggle with that, if that's relevant or needed. So I'll probably read another at some point. The third book that I read is, I think this one's my favorite of the month, and that was The Accusation by Bandy. So this is a collection of short stories. So the author is North Korean and wrote the stories while living in North Korea, mostly in the late 80s, early 90s. And these stories were smuggled out through a relative or family friend and published. And I believe the author, they use the he pronouns for the author, but it's beautiful. The writing is a bit simple, but it's creative. And what is kind of eerie about it is how mundane the stories are. He creates these characters that seem so real, and just their little snapshots. I mean, they're short stories, so little snapshots of their lives, but in very unsettling moments of their lives. And it's almost Shirley Jackson-esque, except if these things were really happening to real people and under a communist regime. Like, they're just kind of unsettling, and the title itself fits The Accusation. It's the littlest thing, being accused of the littlest thing. That's where the power is. You can lose everything just based on the smallest accusation. And you also have the power to ruin the lives of someone else by making an accusation. Some of the stories really address the process of people coming to realize, how they come to realize that all these promises that the North Korean regime has made to them about prosperity in the future after sacrifice, it illustrates the moment when they start to realize maybe this isn't true, maybe what all that they've been promising to us isn't really going to happen, and maybe it's all fake. It's pretty heartbreaking because even though these are fiction, they seem very based on truth. They all feel like something that could have definitely happened to someone. So that is by far my favorite of the month. The things that I have going on now, My book club right now in real life is reading Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Whenever I heard it was about actors, everyone, or a theater troupe in the apocalypse, everyone goes, ooh, that sounds awesome. And my first reaction was, I don't know. It did not appeal to me, but I didn't choose it. Someone else did. And actually I'm glad they did, because I think I will enjoy it. I just hadn't gotten sort of the initiative to read it. So we're reading that. We're just started. And then I'm reading this other book it's actually called Down to This: Squalor and Splendor in a Big City Shanty Town, by Shaughnessy Bishop Stall. And I picked this up at a used bookstore. I actually I don't think I realized when I picked it up that the shanty town is actually in Toronto, which is where I used to live. And it's set in the early 2000s, and it's this young guy who decides to, somewhat decides. He decides he's going to be an author, but he's kind of made a mess of his life, and he decides he's going to go live in this shanty town or tent city in downtown Toronto and document this for a year. And so far, that's what he's doing. It's fine. It's fascinating, partially because I lived in Toronto and I love that city, but I can definitely tell, none of this surprises me that this poverty exists there. If you know the city of Toronto, it's kind of interesting to read from that perspective. So that's basically what I've got going. I'm a little bit afraid to pick up anything else right now because we're going on vacation in a week. So I doubt I'll put anything else up, but we'll see. And I have a chemistry midterm in a week because I don't even know why I did that. So I'll be on vacation in Ontario and with my partner, and probably will get a lot of reading done then, but probably not before that time. So thank you so much for checking it out. I'd love to hear if you've read any of these, what you thought of them, and what you're reading right now. So I look forward to watching all of your videos as well. And have a great weekend.